We are seeing attacks on synagogues, Jewish-owned restaurants and businesses from Australia to New York to Los Angeles, Toronto, London. It's the most dangerous time for Jews since the Holocaust. And Western societies have a choice. If you want your country to go down the anti-Semitic rabbit hole, then just follow the same policies of Keir Starmer in the UK, of Mark Carney in Canada, of the Albanese government in Australia, and your countries will be heading to a hellhole.
For years, Hillel Neuer has stood inside the United Nations, confronting dictators, exposing hypocrisy, and accusing powerful institutions of abandoning moral clarity. But after October 7th, and now amid the growing confrontation involving Iran, Hamas, and the future of the West, many are asking a darker question. Have international institutions lost the ability to distinguish evil from self-defense? Joining us today is the Executive Director of UN Watch, Hillel Neuer. Hillel, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
At a recent speech that you gave at Oxford, you said that accusing Israel of being the greatest threat to regional stability is an inversion of reality itself. How do you think the world got to this point?
Well, that's a very profound question, and there might be near-term causes and much longer-term causes that preceded the era that we're in now. If to be honest, it's hard to know where to begin to ask the question. And how could it be that there are people at Oxford University who think that Israel is a greater threat to regional stability than Iran? Actually, when I began that debate, I said I doubted whether even to dignify that proposition. That was the proposition of the House, that Israel was a greater threat to regional stability than Iran. And I said I hesitated whether to come, and I only accepted because I recognized that there are some propositions that may to many of us may sound too absurd to believe, and yet they are believed. And I noted that in the UK, it was maybe, 20% or something like that, believed that the attacks of July 7th, terror attacks of London, I think it's from 2005, were some kind of conspiracy and were not done by Islamists. And of course, we know that in America and other places, there are people who believe that the 9/11 attacks on September 11th, 2001 were not orchestrated and perpetrated by Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, but rather by the United States government itself in a sick attempt to justify wars against Muslims in Iraq and Afghanistan. So there are many terrible lies that people believe. And certainly today, one of the great lies that people choose to believe is that a tiny country called Israel, which is barely 10 million people, the only democracy in the Middle East, is somehow a threat to the entire region, rather than the evil regimes of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which just massacred 40,000 people, estimated, in the space of about 2 days on January 8th and 9th, 2026, that is openly sponsoring terrorist groups, Hezbollah in Lebanon, which destroyed not only Lebanon, but also Syria, helped Assad kill 500,000 people. Iran sponsors the Houthis, a terrorist organization that has missiles, that has more firepower than many armies do, that can fire missiles 1,000 miles away. It's astonishing. And it's a radical Islamist group that every day their daily anthem that they shout is death to America, death to Israel, and Allahu Akbar. And then, of course, you have these other Shiite militia in Iraq. And then you have Hamas, of course. October 7th was made possible by Iranian training and funding. So that's Iran. And of course, we saw in the past month the past 2 months, the war where Iran attacked all of its neighbors, whether it was Saudi Arabia or UAE or Qatar, or attacks in Turkey and Cyprus and Jordan and Syria. They were just attacking everywhere they possibly could. And of course, also in the Strait of Hormuz. So the facts are clear that the Arab states, the moderate Arab states in the region, are allied with Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran. These are all the states that are interested in stability, and Iran is the instability. And yet, in the West, there are young people, especially, but also people less young, like Tucker Carlson, who want to believe that the Jewish state is somehow cosmically evil. And so I would say it's the perennial scapegoat when there are times of dislocation and disruption in society, as we have the internet and now AI and people are confused and social media look to a scapegoat. And what better scapegoat than the Jews?
What do you think disturbed you more after October 7th, the massacre itself or how parts of the world responded to it?
Well, of course, both were disturbing. The attacks by Hamas were shocking. They were basically a day out of the Holocaust. If we look at the horrific atrocities that they committed, are things that are so appalling to believe, and yet they happened. And Hamas recorded them on live GoPro cameras for the world to see. That, of course, was shocking. We had a recreation of the Holocaust for a day or two. And then for those who were emaciated and starved and tortured in the tunnels for another 2 years, the hostages held by Hamas. But indeed, the reaction in the West in particular was shocking. You had people openly supporting Hamas. And it wasn't only when Israel responded and many Palestinians, Hamas hiding in the tunnels and collateral damage people who were nearby. But even before Israel responded on October 8th, you had people accusing Israel of genocide and cheering Hamas. So that was something very sick. The October 7th seemed to have unleashed a hatred that was building over the past decades. It didn't emerge out of nothing. It was building over the past decades, but October 7th unleashed something terrible in our world.
Do you believe that many international institutions have become morally compromised? And why do so many of these elite institutions seem more disturbed by what Israel does than by what any terrorist organization does?
Well, we do see that leading UN institutions that are supposed to deal with human rights, whether it's the UN Human Rights Council based in Geneva, where it's the UN Commission on the Status of Women, whether it's UNESCO, which is supposed to deal with culture and education in Paris, whether it's the UN committee that oversees NGOs based in New York, a 19-member committee. Many of these bodies are dominated by dictatorships. Doesn't mean all the members are dictatorships, but often the majority. At the Human Rights Council, a majority are either full-on dictatorships or other forms of non-democracies. China, Qatar, Egypt, Iraq, Pakistan, Cuba are members of the United Nations Human Rights Council. And again, they represent more than 50%. So we shouldn't be surprised that they appoint experts who are vitriolically anti-Western, anti-capitalist, anti-colonial, anti-Israel as part of their narrative. And it's not just the famous ones, the infamous ones like Francesca Albanese, who openly supports Hamas, but it's other experts people may not be aware of. But when you see a headline, UN experts said, it's good to know who these experts are. And actually, UN Watch has a report that'll be out soon documenting there's about 59 UN mandates to deal with human rights. And we look at about a fifth of them, about 13 of the experts, and show how many of them are being funded by China. Openly, it's not an allegation. They disclose that they receive donations to their work from China, which is insane. One of the most oppressive regimes in the world is donating money to certain UN experts, and it's the ones that they know what they're getting. There's a guy named Ben Saul from the University of Sydney. So he's an Australian law professor, and he accuses President Trump and Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War Hegseth, of murder, mass murder, nearly every day. And he attacks Israel every day. Basically, he's an apologist for Hamas. Sitting at the University of Sydney, has prominence, and he's a UN expert on so-called counterterrorism. He took $150,000 from China for his UN mandate. What's he done with the money? Nobody knows. It's never been detailed anywhere. There's been no accounting of what's happened with the money. And surprise, surprise, UN expert Ben Saul has never condemned China for putting 1 million Uyghur Muslims in camps, shaving off their beards, destroying their language and culture, and putting them in camps, all under the rubric of counterterrorism. He's the UN expert on counterterrorism, but of course he sees his mandate only to attack the West for alleged excesses after 9/11, for allegedly going after Muslims, and for, quote, Islamophobia, and it gives a free pass to China. And he took $150,000 from China, and he's not the only one, maybe half a dozen of these UN experts. So As you said, the UN bodies are compromised. Our democracies need to speak out. They need to stop giving a free pass. They need to stop going along to get along. I'll mention one other. Again, these are lesser known bodies. The UN Committee on NGOs, a 19-member body, sits in New York, oversees the work of thousands of non-governmental organizations, including my own. My group is called United Nations Watch, based in Geneva. We are an accredited NGO with the UN. We have to answer before this committee. And the committee, they just elected new members. They elected China, they elected Cuba, Nicaragua, Sudan, and Saudi Arabia. So some of the worst regimes in the world were elected by a larger body called the Economic and Social Council, which includes, these are the countries that joined consensus or acclamation to elect China, Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Cuba, Nicaragua to this body that oversees NGOs. The ones who joined in the election include Canada, the UK, France, Germany, Norway, Austria, the Netherlands, Australia, Finland, Switzerland. These are democracies that joined in the election of the dictatorships that I just mentioned and put them on a body that oversees NGOs. So this is literally putting the foxes in charge of the chickens.
Wow. Now, we know that Israel is accused of many different things: genocide, apartheid, all these labels that are thrown at Israel, but they don't legally stick. Has moral language become detached from moral reality in your
Well, the accusations that you mentioned have become blood libels of our time that have no connection to reality and have become dogma for many, certainly in the West, who have rallied around this new church or mosque, whatever you want to call it, but some strange new world religion which can mobilize tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands in London and other European cities and countries, can be mobilized to the streets with the rallying cry, "Free Palestine, from the river to the sea, Israel genocide, Israel apartheid," when the reality is that Israel is the only democracy in a vast region, benighted region of darkness and despotism and oppression against minorities. Ethnic minorities are completely oppressed in the Islamic and Arab world. Women are oppressed in the Islamic and Arab world. Minorities, whether they are religious minorities, ethnic minorities, whether they're gays, they are oppressed in the Arab and Islamic world. They don't have equal rights. Israel is the only country where they have equal rights. Israel is the only country where an Arab has the right to be freely elected in free and fair elections and to run for office in free and fair elections. They do not have that right in neighboring Egypt, Jordan, or Lebanon. So the idea that the only country that has these basic rights is the one that manages to mobilize masses in wild hatred and incitement is something astonishing, but not if you know history. If you know history, you know that in the past 2,000 years, it was always possible to whip up a mob on the streets in the West, in Europe, but also in the Middle East, to whip up hatred against the Jews, to say the Jews are responsible for our ills, and the Jew is the cause of our peril, as the source of all our troubles. That's we heard that in the 1930s in Germany, but in many other places, and that's basically what we're seeing today. It's has a thin veil of saying Palestinian rights. You know, there were people who claimed to care about Sudeten rights in the 90s, and that was just a euphemism for their aggression and ambition to invert it in the name of rights. So people who don't care a whit about Palestinians only claim to care about them if it's used as a hammer against Israel and the Jews. And it's very dangerous. You know, around the world, we are seeing attacks on synagogues, Jewish-owned restaurants and businesses, from Australia to New York to Los Angeles, Toronto, London. It's the most dangerous time for Jews since the Holocaust. And Western societies have a choice. You know, if you want your country to go down the anti-Semitic conspiratorial rabbit hole, then just follow the same policies of Keir Starmer in the UK, of Mark in Canada, of the Albanese government in Australia, and your countries will be heading to a hellhole. And sadly, we have the mayor of New York, Mamdani, giving a new scary path. Just the other day, he endorsed the false narrative that the Palestinians were the victims of 1948-49, when it was they and the Arab states who declared jihad, tried to destroy the nascent Jewish state. The United Nations voted for a Jewish and Arab state. They could have had their Arab Palestinian state. They chose to make war, see that the Jews wouldn't get an inch of any sovereignty anywhere in their native land. And today they falsely call that a Nakba. Nakba meant a failure, the failure of the Arab states who said they would destroy Israel and failed to do so. Arab writers called that a Nakba, 7 decades ago. And today they use the term, they've changed the term to mean that it's some kind of organized assault by the Jews against the Arabs, and Mamdani is promoting that inverted narrative. So it's a very dangerous time.
Yeah. You described Israel as a firewall against Iran's imperial project. What exactly is Israel protecting the world from? And why are there so many people in the West that don't see this?
Well, we know what Iran wants to do because we see it in their own country. Iran, from the moment that Ayatollah Khomeini declared his revolution, he declared that the revolution would be exported around the world. So this is not meant to stop in Iran. And it's why Iran's built into the DNA of the Islamic Republic of Iran is to export the Khomeini revolution around the world. That is, they believe this and they're willing to die for it. And those of us who try to impute Western ideas and motives for radical Islamists are making a mistake. And that's why it's often the people in the region, in the Middle East, who can understand the extremists who try to kill them better than well-intentioned Western experts who just can't understand that you could have ayatollahs and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands who really believe in the most fanatical extremist ideas. And we know what Iran does in their own country. We know that they have a morality police that blinds women for the crime of wearing improper hijab, for defaming the prophet, and will kill 40,000 people in just 2 days for standing up for their rights. So we know what Iran does to their own people, and that's what they would do to the entire region. And we saw how they destroyed Syria, killing 500,000 people, helping Assad kill 500,000 people. They destroyed Lebanon. Lebanon was the pearl of the Middle East. It was the Paris of the Middle East till the 1970s, when first the PLO, but then Iranian-controlled Hezbollah destroyed the country. And Lebanon's a completely failed state, completely bankrupt. Their port blew up because of ammonium being held by Hezbollah at the port. Completely destroyed country, occupied by Iran. To their credit, they're now calling out Iran. A complaint was made at the United Nations by Lebanon, which they detailed how Iranian Revolutionary Guards are in Lebanon illegally and basically occupying Lebanon. So they destroyed Lebanon. They helped destroy Gaza by allowing Hamas and others to destroy Gaza, destroyed Yemen, destroyed Iraq with the militia they have there. So that is Iran. And if we want Iran to continue carrying out assassinations of dissidents in Europe, whether it's in The Hague, whether it's in Scandinavia, whether it's in Brooklyn, where they tried to kidnap Masih Alinejad, the great Iranian women's rights journalist and dissident. They tried to kidnap her and assassinate her in New York at her home. If we want Iran let loose, then keep pretending that the Iranian regime has a place, which is what the Obama administration promoted, the idea that Iran should have its own place and its own balance of power. That was foolish, to put it mildly. And Israel is the only force standing in their way. If not, Iran would have taken over most of the world's oil reserves. We see what Iran could have easily taken over: Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, if it were not for Israel, together with the United States. So that is the firewall.
Why does the UN seem more concerned about protecting the Iranian regime than listening to these Iranian dissidents like Masa, like you mentioned?
Well, look, when the Iran war began, it was astonishing to see how leading UN agencies immediately, within days, were putting out narratives condemning America and Israel and not the Islamic regime. And it wasn't accidental. It was extremely one-sided. They made no mention that the Islamic regime for decades declared that its entire purpose was to destroy the great Satan America and the little Satan Israel, and that every day in Iran, little children in school have to shout death to America, death to Israel. That was their declared policy, right? It's like when Islamic extremists say they want to destroy you, maybe believe them, believe what they say. Iran wasn't hiding what they were doing. There was a Saturday Night Live clip many years ago where Eddie Murphy was playing a character, and Gumby, and he was assassinated, and they were asking people, did you know that so and so was going to do an assassination? Like, oh yeah, he talked about it all the time. He was going to assassinate Gumby, and Iran has been saying this for years, since they took over the revolution. They said they want to destroy America and Israel, and the UN pretends that didn't happen. They pretend that the Islamic regime of Iran was not organizing the Ring of Fire. This guy, Soleimani, who went over to Syria and Iraq and the whole region, he built this Ring of Fire with the terrorist groups, and the UN had nothing to say about that. And they created a narrative as if America and Israel woke up one day and wanted to destroy innocent Iranians. When the opposite is true, when the Iranian people and the dissidents were pleading with America and Israel to destroy the regime, saying, we have no arms. 40,000 of our people have been killed. Please, they begged President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu to destroy the regime. So the UN, sadly, is locked into an anti-American, anti-Israel narrative. What's behind it? We know there are member states that support this, but why would Guterres go this far? I don't have the answer. I know the facts. I know that leading UN agencies, whether it was UN Women, whether it was UNDP, the World Health Organization, it was an orchestrated decision that came from the top. They have global communications strategy sessions. Clearly, orders came from the top to put out messages condemning the US and Israel, and what they're getting for it, history will tell us.
Now, you've publicly confronted figures like Francesca Albanese and challenged some of the most powerful narratives in the world. Have you personally paid a price for speaking this openly?
Well, I'm active in the field of human rights, and there are those who are radical left in the human rights world, and they are a very strong force in the human rights world. They've hijacked it, you might say. Groups like Amnesty International, which are today basically overtly anti-Semitic, they dominate the human rights world. And if you dare to speak out against Islamists or the radical left, you become taboo and stigmatized in the human rights world. So I'm sure there are many conferences where I'm canceled, not invited to. Obviously, there are security risks. We take we take that very seriously. We take security very seriously. So yes, if you speak out today, you pay a price. But whenever someone speaks out, it encourages so many others to do the same. It becomes infectious, and that's my encouragement for everyone. Is it's easier for me because my job is to be courageous and speak out. That's what I'm paid for. If you have another kind of a job, you may pay a price. But if society as a whole, if we don't speak out and say the truth, then everyone else will follow. And the opposite is true. When you see a person standing up, taking a courageous stand, it gives you strength. And so I encourage everyone to speak out. Otherwise, our world is lost, and it'll be a world dominated by radical Islamists and their apologists.
As we know, there's a clear bias against Israel at the UN. At this point, what is exactly the benefit of Israel being at the UN?
Well, Israel fought very hard to get its seat at the Assembly of Nations. There was the vote, of course, in 1947, 29 November, where the United Nations voted to create a Jewish state and an Arab state. That was a great victory, and the Jews in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv danced, as did many others celebrated around the world. And then there was the other battle to get admitted. Once Israel was declared in 1948, it had to be admitted as a UN member state, and that only happened in 1949. It was not an easy battle, and Israel was admitted as a UN member state. And any country that wants to be recognized at the international level wants to be at the UN. So I think if Israel were not at the UN, it would want to be there. Now, of course, people say, well, what good is the UN? And all it does is condemn democracies and give a free pass to dictatorships. But there's no easy solution. There's no magic bullet. Nothing would please Israel's enemies more than to see them be, like Taiwan isn't at the UN. Of course, Taiwan wants to be at the UN, wants to be at the World Health Assembly and other things. That's a typical indication that you're a sovereign state. So I don't think Israel wants to leave the UN, but it is, of course, a dilemma where by being there, they have to subject themselves to all kinds of excessive scapegoating. That's a ritual at the UN. More resolutions on Israel than on Iran, Syria, North Korea combined. But there's no easy solution. Israel, of course, at the UN does have the ability to use the platform. That is a global platform. And certainly being present for the ambassador and diplomats does offer an occasion for Israel to have discussions with countries that they may not otherwise have access to. So the UN can sometimes be, even critics of the UN will recognize that it's when it functions as a world forum just for people to meet and talk, there's nothing wrong with that. It's when they take positions on things and the majority are often an immoral majority, that's when it becomes problematic. And when you have UN officials who are twisting the UN's principles and become apologists for terrorist groups, that's obviously an improper use of the UN. So it's not an easy solution. I think Israel, at the end of the day, has the ability to call out UN mechanisms that are biased while also taking advantage of the podium, the global podium that it does offer.
After everything you've seen, terrorism, dictatorships, propaganda, institutional hypocrisy, what still gives you hope today?
It's a difficult time in the post-October 7th world. It's a very dark time, but we mustn't lose sight of hope. Certainly in the region, we see that the United Arab Emirates is an example of an Arab country that is looking towards the future, not to the past. If Hamas was looking to build terror tunnels, you have the United Arab Emirates, an Arab Muslim country, looking to build up hundreds of stories and to build towards the future and building relations with Israel. And we were told that Israel even sent troops and an Iron Dome battery to defend the UAE. So that relationship is very substantial. It's been tested by the difficult years of the past few years, where there was a war between Israel and some of its Arab neighbors. And the Emirates understood that it's on Israel's side. And Israel defended the Emirates in the recent war with Iran, where it was very much targeted by Iran. So I think we can look to the Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, other countries that are willing to come forward and build relations with Israel. I think that does offer hope. We see countries like Argentina, the United States, Czech Republic in certain cases, certain countries that are willing to take a stand, a principled stand. We see in the UK, it's the opposition, but Kemi, the head of the Conservative Party, take a very principled stand. So clearly there are people who have a moral backbone. They are the minority, let's not pretend. So it certainly for Jewish people, for people who care about the Western civilization, it's a very difficult time. But there are people who can distinguish between democracies and dictatorships, between terrorists and their victims, between a vision for a society that is noble, that respects the rights of the individual, respects human dignity, and those that are conspiratorial, that are full of hate and that are nihilistic or destructive. And there are enough good people that we have to band together, find the courage, and fight to defend our civilization. We have no choice.
I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for everything that you do for the Jewish people, for the state of Israel. How can people follow you, support your organization?
Sure, people should help our cause by following unwatch.org, signing up on our website. By doing so, signing up on our website, unwatch.org, they get informed of what's happening and how they can take action. Our campaigns succeeded in getting certain anti-Semites and anti-American individuals sanctioned and other significant measures. So get informed, take action. Of course, we're a not-for-profit, so anyone who wants to support financially can make a tax-deductible donation also on our website, unwatch.org, and keeps us going. And our followers, we have hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, millions of views. They are our followers and our supporters are the wind in our sails. So we thank all our followers for their support.
Thank you. Wishing
Thank
you all
you.
the best.
Appreciate it.
If you have a 401k or an IRA, please listen. Gold is at record highs. What many people don't know is this: you can move part of your retirement money legally and without tax penalties into physical gold you actually own. Alpha Omega Gold helps you do this through a gold IRA. Your gold is real. It is stored safely. It is in your name. Learn more at ao.gold/stand. Alpha Omega Gold is our sponsor, and they proudly stand with Israel.